Part 1. The Theft. The twin sons of Ember's Edge cast long shadows across the wasteland as the Kaldreth ships descended through the atmosphere. They moved like predators, even in flight, sleek, dark vessels that seemed to cut through the sky rather than fly through it. Inside the lead ship, Matriarch Syrinx stood at the command platform, her massive form tense with barely controlled rage. Her scales, deep crimson with edges of gold, caught the dim interior lights. Her eyes, ancient, intelligent, and currently burning with fury, were fixed on the holographic display, showing the surface below. "The signal is coming from the salvage yards," reported Kethis, the pack's navigator. His voice was careful, measured. Everyone knew how close Syrinx was to losing control. Sector 7. Old mining territory, abandoned for 3 cycles now. 3 cycles, the same amount of time since the hatchlings had been stolen. Syrinx's claws dug into the metal platform, leaving deep grooves. Behind her, the rest of her pack waited in tense silence. 12 adult Kaldreth, each one a being of terrible power and grace. In the wider galaxy, they were feared. Entire pirate fleets had scattered at the mere rumor of Kaldreth pursuit, but fear meant nothing when their children were missing. Matriarch, Vorath's deep voice cut through the silence. He was her second, scarred from countless battles, missing part of his left wing from a war long past. "We should burn the entire sector. Leave nothing standing. Make an example." Other pack members growled their agreement. The sound filled the ship like distant thunder. Syrinx said nothing for a long moment. Her mind replayed the last 3 cycles, the diplomatic mission to the human colonies that was supposed to be routine. The hatchlings had been kept in a secure facility, guarded, protected. Then the alarms, the fire, the chaos. And when the smoke cleared, 6 of their youngest were simply gone. 6 babies. Barely old enough to speak. Still learning to control their fire breath. Vulnerable in ways adult Kaldreth never were. The pack had torn through the sector searching. They'd interrogated smugglers, destroyed 3 black market stations, left a trail of wrecked ships across 2 systems. Every lead pointed to the syndicate cartel's ruthless criminal organizations that trafficked in rare and exotic beings. But the hatchlings had vanished like smoke. Until 2 days ago, when an old Kaldreth distress beacon had activated from this forgotten moon. "We investigate first," Syrinx finally said, her voice carrying absolute authority. "The beacon means one of our own activated it. The hatchlings' life signs are strong on the sensors, not distressed, not in immediate danger." "How is that possible?" Kethis asked. "If the slavers have them, that's what we need to find out," Syrinx interrupted. She turned to face her pack, and they all felt the weight of her gaze. "But if this is a trap, if whoever took our children is waiting down there, then Vorath will have his wish. We will leave nothing but ash." The ship shuddered as it entered landing sequence. The salvage yard was a graveyard of broken dreams and failed enterprises. Rusted machinery lay scattered across kilometers of red dust. Old mining equipment jutted from the ground like the bones of metal giants. Here and there, the shells of abandoned buildings stood against the wind. The Kaldreth landed their ships in a circle around the largest structure, an old processing facility built into the side of a cliff. The architecture was human, all function and no beauty, designed for efficiency rather than aesthetics. Syrinx emerged first, her massive form casting a long shadow in the morning light. She was 15 meters from nose to tail. Her wings folded against her back. When she breathed, small wisps of smoke escaped her nostrils. The other pack members spread out, moving with practiced precision. They'd done this before: searched buildings, tracked prey, prepared for battle. But this time was different. This time, their children's lives hung in the balance. Vorath approached the facility's main entrance, his head low, scanning for threats. "Fresh scorch marks," he reported. "Energy weapons, human and Krell designs, and," he paused, his nostrils flaring, "blood, multiple species. A battle happened here, recently." Syrinx moved closer, her own senses confirming what Vorath reported. But there was something else. Something that made her pause. The scent of her hatchlings. Faint, but unmistakable. They had been here. were still here. And beneath that, human blood. Not old. Days. Perhaps. And something else. The smell of medical supplies. Food rations. Makeshift shelters. Matriarch, Keithis called from the side of the building. You need to see this. She found him standing over 3 dead bodies. Mercenaries, by their equipment, a mix of species, all armed with heavy weapons. All killed with precision. Energy burns through vital areas. Professional work, but scattered around them were signs of something different. Improvised barricades. Scattered shell casings from ballistic weapons, primitive but effective. Blast marks that suggested someone had been using the terrain itself as a weapon. Someone made a stand here, Keithis said quietly. Against superior numbers. Recently, Serex's mind raced. The pieces didn't fit together in any way that made sense. Slavers fought back against rescue attempts, yes. But this looked like someone had been defending the facility, not attacking it. She moved to the main entrance. The door was sealed, reinforced from the inside. But her sensors picked up life signs beyond. Small ones, familiar ones, her hatchlings, all 6 of them, alive. And one other life sign, larger, human-sized, injured, based on the thermal readings, but alive and awake. Serex raised her claw to tear through the door when speakers crackled to life around them. A human voice, rough with pain and exhaustion, spoke in heavily accented but understandable Kaldrath tongue. If you're here for the kids, they're safe. But if you're the bastards who took them... There was a pause. A sound like labored breathing. I've got 30 plasma charges rigged to blow. This whole place becomes a crater. Your move. The pack froze. Serex felt her blood turn to ice. A human. A human had her children. And was threatening to destroy them all, rather than surrender. Vorath snarled, flames licking between his teeth. Let me burn him out. But Serex held up a claw for silence. Because in that moment, she'd heard something else in the human's voice. Not cruelty. Not greed. Desperation. And something else. Something that sounded like protection. Stand down, she ordered her pack. Then, speaking toward the building in careful standard tongue, she called out, Human, I am Matriarch Serex of the Crimson Wing Pack. Those hatchlings you hold are mine. Explain yourself. Now. Silence. Then, that exhausted voice again. Prove it. Tell me something only their mother would know. Ah. Despite everything, Serex felt a flicker of something like hope, because kidnappers didn't ask for proof. They didn't care about verification. The eldest, she said, her voice softening slightly, has a small scar on his left forepaw. From when he tried to eat a plasma coil because it glowed like fire. He wouldn't stop crying until I sang him the old hunting songs. Another long pause. Then, okay. You're really them? The parents. The human's voice cracked slightly. Thank the stars. I wasn't sure anyone got my signal. Open the door, Serex commanded. Can't, the human replied. Dead man's switch on the charges. I pass out, everything blows. And I'm not doing great here, so we're going to do this carefully. One of you, just one, come to the interior door. Slowly. I need to see you're not the same crew that's been trying to kill me for 2 weeks. Vorath growled. This is a trap, Matriarch. Perhaps. But Serex's instincts honed over centuries told her otherwise. This human wasn't their enemy. I'm coming in, she announced, folding her wings tight and approaching the entrance alone. But human? If you've harmed my children, 30 plasma charges won't save you from me. Fair enough, came the tired reply. For what it's worth. I tried my best to keep them safe. The door opened with a grinding sound of protesting metal. Serex stepped into darkness, her eyes adjusting instantly. And what she saw inside would change everything she thought she knew about humans. The interior of the facility was dark, except for emergency lights casting a red glow across the main chamber. Sarex's eyes adjusted immediately, taking in every detail with predatory focus. The space had been turned into a fortress. Makeshift barricades constructed from salvaged equipment blocked every entrance. Weapon emplacements, crude but effective, covered all angles. Empty food containers and medical supplies were scattered across the floor. Scorch marks on the walls told stories of recent battles, and in the center of it all, positioned between Sarex and a reinforced doorway leading to an inner chamber, stood a human. He looked half dead already. Marcus Chen was tall for a human, but he seemed small in the vast space. Burns covered the left side of his face and neck, the skin raw and blistered. His right arm hung in an improvised sling. Blood, old and new, stained his salvager's clothing. He swayed slightly on his feet, held upright by will alone. In his good hand, he held a detonator. His finger rested on the trigger with the careful pressure of someone who knew exactly how much force was needed to activate it. But it was his eyes that caught Sarex's attention. Brown, tired, filled with pain but also determined. These were not the eyes of a kidnapper or slaver. These were the eyes of someone who had been through hell and refused to surrender. "That's far enough," Marcus said, his voice hoarse. He spoke in standard tongue now. Easier for him than Caldrath language. "I need to know. Are you alone? Are the others staying outside?" For now," Sarex replied, matching his language. She kept her movements slow, non-threatening despite every instinct screaming at her to rush forward to the chamber where she could sense her hatchlings. "But my pack won't wait forever. Explain what happened. Why do you have my children?" Marcus laughed bitterly, then winced as the movement caused him pain. "You want the long version or the short version? Because honestly, I'm not sure how much longer I can stand here." "Start talking," Sarex said, her voice hard. "Now." Marcus took a shaky breath. 2 weeks ago, I was running my usual salvage routes, looking for scrap, old tech, anything worth selling. Found a crashed ship in the deep wastes. Thought it was my lucky day." He gestured around the chamber with his injured arm, grimacing. "Turns out luck isn't always good. The ship was a slaver vessel. When I got inside, the crew was already dead. Looked like they'd fought among themselves, maybe over payment, but in the cargo hold." Marcus's voice softened. "I found 6 containers. Climate-controlled, reinforced. Expensive equipment for transporting living cargo." Sarex felt her claws dig into the floor. "My hatchlings, they were terrified," Marcus continued, crying, huddled together. "And I found the shipping manifest. They were being taken to the veiled sector. Black market auction. High bids already coming in from genetics labs, private collectors, people who wanted." He stopped, his face hardening. "People who wanted to do terrible things. And you took them," Sarex said, trying to understand. "Why?" Marcus looked at her like she'd asked why water was wet. "Because I couldn't leave them there. What kind of person would I be if I just walked away from kids in danger?" "Most beings would have," Sarex pointed out. "The safer choice. The logical choice. My species isn't known for friendship with humans. We're competitors for resources. Sometimes enemies. Why risk yourself for alien children? Does it matter that they're alien?" Marcus shot back, sudden fire in his tired voice. "They're kids. That's all that matters." Before Sarex could respond, sounds came from the inner chamber, small chirping noises, the distinctive calls of Caldrath hatchlings recognizing their mother's voice. Marcus glanced toward the door, his expression softening. "They've been asking for you. Well, not in words, but I could tell. They knew their family would come." "Open the door," Sarex commanded. "Let me see them." "In a minute," Marcus said. "You need to understand the rest first. After I took them, I brought them here. Old facility I knew about. Secure. Defensible. I sent out that distress beacon using the old Caldrath frequency I found in the ship's logs. Then I waited. But others came first," Sarex guessed. Marcus nodded grimly. "The slavers had recovery teams. First group showed up 3 days after I sent the signal. 6 heavily armed mercs. I managed to fight them off, but he gestured to his burns. Barely. Then another group came. Then another. Each time they came with more weapons, more people. How did you survive? Syrinx asked, genuinely curious. Humans weren't known as warriors. They were considered weak, fragile, relying on tools rather than natural weapons. I cheated, Marcus said with a ghost of a smile. I know human-built systems. This place was constructed by a human mining company. I turned everything into a trap, rigged the doors, the ventilation, the power systems, used every dirty trick I learned in the salvage business. And I got lucky. Really lucky. Luck runs out, Syrinx observed. Yeah, Marcus agreed quietly. Last group came yesterday. They're regrouping now. But they'll be back. Bigger force this time, and He swayed again, catching himself. I'm done. Out of ammunition, out of tricks. And if I'm being honest, probably bleeding internally. When I heard your ships, I thought they'd come back with air support, but then you spoke, and I realized, you're actually here. The parents. Syrinx studied him carefully. Every Caldrath sense told her this human was telling the truth. The evidence supported his story. The dead mercenaries outside. The defensive positions. The fact that the hatchlings were alive and, from what her sensors indicated, healthy. But one thing didn't make sense. You could have run, she said. Taken a ship. Left them here with supplies. Saved yourself. Marcus's eyes hardened. No. I couldn't. Why not? Because they trusted me, Marcus said simply. After everything they'd been through being taken, scared, alone, they finally felt safe. I wasn't going to betray that. I wasn't going to be another person who abandoned them when things got difficult. The inner chamber door suddenly rattled. Small claws scratched at it from the other side. Chirping grew louder, more insistent. Marcus smiled despite his pain. They know you're here. They've got good ears. He looked at Syrinx, and she saw the exhaustion finally winning. I'm going to open the door now, but I need you to know something first. If there are more of those slaver teams coming, if this isn't over, those kids can't go through this again. Promise me. Whatever happens next, you keep them safe. They're my children, Syrinx said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. I would burn galaxies to keep them safe. Marcus studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Okay. Okay. I believe you. His finger moved away from the detonator trigger. There are no charges. I was bluffing, didn't have the materials, but I needed. He swayed dangerously. Needed you to talk first. Needed to be sure. He reached for the door control, pressed it, and the reinforced barrier slid open. 6 small forms exploded from the chamber in a chorus of excited chirps and cries. They were miniature versions of adult Caldrath, each about the size of a large dog, covered in scales that gleamed even in the dim light. Their wings were still developing, their horns small and blunt. They rushed toward Syrinx, calling for their mother. But halfway there, the eldest stopped. Turned. Looked back at Marcus. The human had collapsed to his knees, the detonator falling from his hand. He smiled at the hatchlings, blood on his teeth. Go on, he whispered. Go to your mom. But the eldest hatchling didn't go. Instead, it ran back to Marcus, pressing its small body against him, chirping frantically. The others followed, surrounding the human, their distress calls filling the chamber. They weren't just comfortable with him. They were bonded to him. Syrinx felt something shift in her understanding of humans, of this human specifically. She moved forward slowly, her massive form towering over Marcus and the hatchlings. She could kill him with one claw, end him for daring to touch her children. But as she looked down at the scene at her babies trying to hold up a human who had given everything to protect them, she made a different choice. Kethis. She called out toward the entrance. Bring the medical kit. And tell Vorath to stand down. The human is not our enemy. Marcus looked up at her, confusion and relief mixing on his damaged face. What happens now? What? Syrinx carefully extended one massive claw, and with surprising gentleness, she touched the top of Marcus's head. It was a gesture of acknowledgement among her kind. Recognition of courage and honor. Now, she said softly, you rest, and when you wake, we will discuss the debt my pack owes you. Marcus's eyes closed, and he fell forward. The eldest hatchling caught him with surprising strength, refusing to let the human fall completely. The others crowded closer, their small bodies forming a protective circle around the one who had protected them. Outside, Vorath entered and stopped dead at the scene. Matriarch. I don't understand. Why as a human? Because, Syrinx interrupted, gathering her hatchlings carefully, noting how they refused to leave Marcus even as she touched them. This human did what we could not. He kept our children safe when they had no one else. That makes him pack. And as the medical team rushed in to treat Marcus's wounds, Syrinx understood that something had changed. The human had shown her something she'd never expected to find in his species. True courage without expectation of reward. And that changed everything. Marcus woke to warmth and the sound of purring. His eyes opened slowly, adjusting to soft lighting that was much more pleasant than the harsh emergency lights he'd grown used to. For a moment, he couldn't remember where he was. The ceiling above him was unfamiliar curved metal, with bioluminescent strips that pulsed gently like a heartbeat. Then memory crashed back. The Caldrath. Syrinx. Collapsing in front of the matriarch after 2 weeks of hell. He tried to sit up and realized something was weighing him down. Looking to his side, Marcus found the eldest hatchling curled against him, its small body rising and falling with sleep. 2 others were draped across his legs. The remaining 3 were piled together at the foot of the bed, occasionally chirping in their dreams. They refused to leave you, a voice said from the shadows. Marcus turned his head carefully. Syrinx emerged into the light, her massive form somehow graceful despite her size. In the better lighting, he could see the intricate patterns of her scales, the intelligence in her ancient eyes. How long was I out? Marcus asked. His voice sounded better, stronger. He touched his face and found smooth skin where burns had been. His arm moved without pain. 2 days, Syrinx replied. Our medical technology is advanced. Your injuries have been healed. Internal bleeding stopped. Burns regenerated. You'll have no permanent damage. Marcus looked down at the sleeping hatchlings. The eldest stirred, opened one eye, saw Marcus was awake, and chirped happily before settling back down. They're beautiful, he said softly. They're alive because of you, Syrinx said, moving closer. The floor vibrated slightly with each step. She settled onto her haunches, bringing her head closer to Marcus's level. We need to talk, Marcus Chen. That sounds ominous. It's necessary, Syrinx said. Do you understand what you've done? By Caldrath law, by our oldest traditions, you are now Kethril, bonded guardian. You risked your life for our young without obligation, without payment, without tribe connection. This creates a sacred bond. Marcus frowned. I just did what anyone should do. But they don't, Syrinx said firmly. In 3 cycles of searching, we encountered hundreds of beings who knew about the hatchlings. Traders who'd heard rumors. Station masters who'd seen shipping manifests. Even other species who claimed to respect life. Not one helped. Most ignored us. Some tried to profit from our desperation. You were the only one who acted. So what does this bonded guardian thing mean? Marcus asked, though part of him wasn't sure he wanted to know. It means my pack owes you a life debt, Syrinx explained. It means you hold a sacred position in our culture. It means... She paused, as if the words were difficult. The hatchlings have imprinted on you. They see you as family now. Breaking that bond would harm them psychologically. Marcus gently stroked the eldest hatchling's scales. The little one purred louder. I wasn't trying to become anyone's family. I was just trying to keep them alive until you found them. Intention doesn't matter, Sarek said. Result does. And now we have a problem. What kind of problem? Sarek's expression darkened. The slaver network that took my children is vast. Connected to the syndicate cartels, criminal organizations that operate outside Galactic Council jurisdiction. They traffic in rare beings, forbidden technology, illegal weapons. They're powerful, ruthless, and they don't forgive interference. Let me guess, Marcus said. They're not happy I took their merchandise. There's a bounty on your head, Sarek confirmed. Not for money. For reputation. The syndicates can't afford to let someone defy them publicly and live. It shows weakness. Other potential heroes might get ideas. Marcus felt cold despite the warmth of the hatchlings. So I'm dead either way. Not if you're under pack protection, Sarek said. But that requires you to stay with us. Accept the bond formally. Become part of our family structure. For how long? Until the threat ends, Sarek said. Or, she hesitated again. Permanently, if you choose. The hatchlings will need years to mature. Having you present would benefit their development. Marcus looked around the chamber. Through a viewport, he could see stars he didn't recognize. He was on a Caldrath ship, light years from anything familiar. His salvage business was probably already picked clean by scavengers. His ship destroyed, his old life essentially over. What if I say no? He asked quietly. Then we'll protect you as long as we can, Sarek said. Give you resources to start somewhere new, somewhere hidden. But the hatchlings will suffer, and the syndicates will eventually find you. They always do. It wasn't really a choice. Marcus understood that. But the strange thing was, he wasn't sure he minded. Can I ask you something? Marcus said. Speak. Why do you care what I want? You're stronger, more advanced. You could just decide for me. Sarek's eyes softened slightly. Because that's not how bonds work. They require willing participation. And because you've earned the right to choose your own path, even if that path leads away from us. Before Marcus could respond, the chamber door opened. Vorath entered, his scarred form filling the doorway. He looked at Marcus with an expression that was hard to read. Matriarch, Vorath said. We've received a distress call, another pack. The Silver Scale clan from the outer reaches. Their hatchlings have been taken. Same signature as before, same slaver network. Sarek stood abruptly. The movement woke all 6 hatchlings, who chirped in confusion. How many? She demanded. 4 hatchlings, Vorath said. Taken 3 days ago. The pack is requesting our help. They've heard what happened here. They know we found our young. We leave immediately, Sarek commanded. Then she turned to Marcus. This is what I meant. The syndicates are escalating. They're not stopping with my pack. They're targeting multiple Caldrath families. Marcus felt something stir inside him. Anger. The thought of more kids being taken, being terrified, being treated like property. It made his blood boil. What are you going to do? He asked. Hunt, Sarek said simply. Track them. Find the hatchlings. Destroy whoever took them. Can I help? The words came out before Marcus fully thought them through. Vorath snorted. Humyn. You're barely healed. You have no combat training, no weapons. What could you possibly offer? Marcus met the scarred Caldrath's gaze steadily. I survived 2 weeks against professional mercenaries with nothing but salvage equipment and bad attitude. I know human systems. Most of the galaxy runs on retrofitted human technology, because we build things cheap and effective. I know how criminals think because I've dealt with them my entire career. And I know how to improvise when things go wrong. He's not wrong, Sarek said thoughtfully. Human unpredictability is legendary. They think differently than most species. Their tactics are considered insane by military standards. But effective. This is madness, Vorath growled. Taking a human on a combat mission? He'll get himself killed. Maybe, Marcus admitted. But if there are more kids out there going through what these 6 went through, He looked down at the hatchlings clustered around him, their large eyes watching him intently. Someone has to help them. If that someone is me, then okay. I'm in. Sarek studied him for a long moment. You understand the risks? These aren't local criminals. The syndicates have armies. Professional killers. Advanced technology. $200. Armies for. Advanced technology. I figured that out when they kept sending teams to kill me, Marcus said dryly. And you still want to help? Marcus thought about his old life. Salvaging scrap. Barely making enough to survive. No family. No purpose beyond the next job. Then he looked at the hatchlings. Remembered their cries when he'd first found them. Remembered how they'd pressed against him seeking safety. Yeah, he said firmly. I want to help. The eldest hatchling chirped and pressed its head against Marcus's hand. The others echoed the sound, a chorus of approval. Vorath looked at Sarek in disbelief. Matriarch. This is highly irregular. Humans and Kaldrath don't work together. Our species have too much history. Too much competition. Perhaps that's been the problem. Sarek said quietly. Perhaps we've been so focused on our differences that we missed potential allies. She extended her claw to Marcus. Very well, Marcus Chen, you will accompany us, but we do this properly. You will train with the pack. Learn our ways as we learn yours. And you will follow orders during combat. Agreed? Marcus reached out and touched his hand to her claw. The scale was warm beneath his palm. Agreed. Good, Sarek said. Because we leave in 6 hours. The silver scale hatchlings don't have time for us to debate this further. Vorath. Prepare the Humyn. Get him proper equipment, and someone teach him how to move in zero gravity before he embarrasses us. Vorath grumbled but nodded. Come on, Humyn. Let's see if you're more than just lucky. As Marcus stood, the hatchlings reluctantly let him go, though they followed him to the door. The eldest tugged at his pant leg, chirping insistently. They want to come with you. Sarek translated. Amusement in her voice. Training probably isn't safe for them, Marcus said. They've been through worse and survived. Sarek pointed out. Besides, they're your responsibility now, Kethril. Guardian means guardian. They go where you go. Marcus looked down at 6 pairs of hopeful eyes and sighed. All right. But you all have to promise to stay back when things get dangerous. Deal? 6 enthusiastic chirps answered him. As Marcus left the chamber with his unlikely new family following, he couldn't help but smile. 2 weeks ago, he'd been a nobody salvager barely scraping by. Now he was apparently part of a dragon pack, about to hunt slavers across the stars. His life had gotten very strange. But maybe, he thought, strange was exactly what he needed. The slaver fortress known as the Maw hung in the darkness of space like a metal predator. It was massive, a converted mining station surrounded by smaller ships that orbited it like protective satellites. Weapon platforms dotted its surface. Shields shimmered faintly in the starlight. Marcus floated in the observation bay of the Kaldrath ship, studying the fortress through the viewport. Behind him, Sarek and her senior pack members reviewed the mission plan one final time. The silver scale pack is creating a distraction on the far side, Kethis explained, pointing to the tactical display. They'll hit hard and loud, drawing the mercenary fleet away from the station. That gives us a 30-minute window. 30 minutes to infiltrate, find the hatchlings, and extract, Vorath said, his tone skeptical. Assuming everything goes perfectly. Which it won't. That's why we have the Humyn, Sarek said, looking at Marcus. Show them. Marcus pushed away from the viewport, floating to the tactical display with the awkward grace of someone still learning zero-gravity movement. The hatchlings floated nearby, mimicking his movements and chirping with amusement whenever he fumbled. The Maw was built by the Terran Deep Space Mining Corporation about 40 years ago, Marcus began. I salvaged equipment from 3 of their other stations. I know the layout, the systems, the weak points. He manipulated the hologram, highlighting sections of the fortress. Security focuses on external threats. Internal systems are automated, running on old software that nobody bothers updating because it works well enough. And you can bypass this security? Vorath asked. I can do better than bypass it, Marcus said with a slight smile. I can turn it against them. See these maintenance tunnels? He traced glowing lines through the station's interior. They're too small for most species, but a human can fit. I get inside through here, reach the central control node, and I can lock doors, cut life support to specific sections, trigger false alarms, create chaos. While you create chaos, we breach here. Serix indicated a docking bay on the station's lower hemisphere. Fight our way to the holding cells. Free the hatchlings and anyone else imprisoned there. What about extraction? Keithus asked. That's the tricky part, Marcus admitted. Once they realize what's happening, they'll lock down the station. We'll need to move fast. I'll program the airlocks to open on command, but we'll only have seconds before emergency systems override my access. Too many variables, Vorath muttered. Too much can go wrong. It already has gone wrong, Serix said firmly. 4 hatchlings are in that station right now, scared and alone. We don't have the luxury of waiting for a perfect plan. We work with what we have. Marcus felt something brush against his arm. The eldest hatchling had floated closer, its large eyes watching him with absolute trust. The weight of that trust settled on his shoulders. We'll get them out, he said quietly. Whatever it takes. The infiltration began exactly as planned, which made Marcus nervous. In his experience, when things went smoothly at first, they usually fell apart spectacularly later. He moved through the maintenance tunnel in darkness, relying on a small headlamp and his memory of similar stations. The tunnel was cramped, lined with pipes and cables that hummed with energy. Every 20 meters, he passed ventilation grates that offered glimpses into the station proper. Through one grate, he saw mercenaries, a mixed group of species, all heavily armed. Through another, he glimpsed cargo bays filled with containers like the ones that had held Serix's hatchlings. His jaw clenched. How many beings were trapped in this place? I'm approaching the control node, Marcus whispered into his communicator. 2 guards visible. Give me 3 minutes. We're in position, Serix's voice crackled back. Waiting on your signal. Marcus reached the access panel, carefully removing the cover. The control systems beyond were exactly as he remembered, outdated, but functional. Designed for ease of maintenance rather than security. Nobody expected threats from the inside. He pulled out a small device he'd built from salvaged parts, connecting it to the system. Code scrolled across the tiny screen as he worked. His fingers moved with practiced efficiency, muscle memory from years of breaking into abandoned stations and ships. 5 minutes later, he had complete access. I'm in, Marcus reported. Beginning Phase 2. He started systematically locking doors throughout the station, isolating groups of mercenaries in different sections. Fire alarms began blaring. Emergency lights flickered on and off. Life support warnings flashed across control panels, convincing the crew that critical systems were failing. Chaos, just as promised. Now, Marcus said into the communicator. Hit them now. Through the ventilation system, he heard the distant sound of explosions. The Caldrath assault had begun. Marcus pulled himself through the tunnels toward the holding cells, following the station schematics burned into his memory. He emerged in a service corridor just as 2 guards ran past, responding to the alarms. They never looked up at the maintenance hatch. The holding cells were in the station's core, protected by heavy blast doors. But Marcus wasn't going through the doors. He was going through the walls. Using a plasma cutter from his kit, he began cutting through the less reinforced side panel. The metal glowed red, then white, then fell away in molten chunks. Beyond was darkness, and the sound of frightened voices. Hey, Marcus called softly into the opening. Anyone in there speak standard? Silence. Then a small voice, young and scared. Who are you? Someone who's getting you out of here, Marcus said. Stay back from this wall. I'm cutting through. As he worked, he heard the battle intensifying elsewhere in the station. Energy weapons. Roars that could only be Caldrath. The screams of mercenaries who'd never faced an angry dragon pack before. The wall panel fell inward. Marcus squeezed through the opening into the holding area. What he found made his blood run cold. The space was larger than he'd expected, filled with cages. And not just Caldrath hatchlings, there were dozens of beings. Young ones from at least 10 different species. Some barely old enough to walk, all of them dirty, scared, malnourished. "Oh no," Marcus breathed. "There are so many of you." 4 small Caldrath hatchlings huddled in the nearest cage. They looked at Marcus with fearful eyes until one of them chirped tentatively. Recognition. Serex's hatchlings must have told others about the human who'd helped them. "I'm getting all of you out," Marcus said firmly, moving to the cage controls. Every single one. But as he worked on releasing the locks, alarms of a different kind began to sound. Not the ones he'd triggered. These were real warnings. "Humyn." Vorath's voice crackled urgently over the communicator. "We've got a problem. The mercenary fleet is returning early. And they're not alone. There's a syndicate capital ship with them. We're about to be severely outnumbered." Marcus's hands froze on the controls. A capital ship meant serious firepower. It meant the Caldrath assault team might not make it to the holding cells at all. "How long until they engage?" Marcus asked. 5 minutes, Vorath said. "Maybe less." Marcus looked at the cages, at the frightened children of a dozen species watching him with desperate hope. 5 minutes to free them all. 5 minutes to get them through a station full of mercenaries to the extraction point. 5 minutes to save lives that the galaxy had forgotten. The eldest Caldrath hatchling in the cage pressed against the bars, chirping softly. It sounded like a question. "Are you leaving us too?" "No," Marcus said aloud. His decision made. "I'm not leaving anyone." He turned back to his communicator. "Serex, change of plans. There are too many prisoners here for a standard extraction. I need you to fight your way to the main hangar bay instead. I'll bring them there." "That's on the opposite side of the station," Serex protested. "Through the most defended sections." "Serex, I know," Marcus said, his fingers flying over the cage controls. Locks began clicking open one by one. "But the hangar has ships. Small ones. I can fly them out if you can secure the bay." Locks. Locks began clicking. "Also, Mark. I can fly them out if you can secure the bay. You can't possibly navigate through this battle with civilian craft full of children," Keithis said. "Watch me," Marcus replied. "I didn't survive 2 weeks of hell just to leave these kids behind because it got complicated." There was a pause. Then Serex's voice, filled with something that might have been pride. "Understood. We're moving to the hangar. Don't get yourself killed." "Humyn. Wasn't planning on it," Marcus said, opening the last cage. The children began emerging cautiously. "All right. Everyone listen up. I know you're scared. I know you don't know me. But I promise you I'm getting you home. All of you. Now can everyone walk?" Most nodded. A few of the smallest ones looked uncertain. "Okay. Bigger kids help the smaller ones," Marcus instructed. "Stay together. Stay quiet. And when I say run, you run as fast as you can. Understood?" Dozens of eyes watched him. Dozens of small voices answered in various languages, but the meaning was clear. They understood, and more importantly, they trusted him. Marcus checked his equipment one last time. His weapon had maybe 20 shots left. His communicator was barely functioning, and he was about to lead a group of rescued children through a war zone. "This is either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever done," he muttered. The eldest Caldrath hatchling from the group chirped and pressed against his leg. Somehow, that made him feel better. "Right then," Marcus said, moving to the door and checking the corridor beyond. "Let's go steal some ships." Outside, the battle raged. Inside, Marcus led his unlikely group through maintenance corridors and service passages, avoiding the main fighting. Every time they heard footsteps, they hid. Every time alarms changed pitch, they ran. They were halfway to the hangar when the station shook violently. The capital ship had arrived and was engaging the Caldrath forces. "Keep moving," Marcus urged as the children stumbled. "We're almost there." Almost wasn't the same as safe, but it was better than giving up, and Marcus Chen had never been very good at giving up. Syrinx and her pack had carved a path of destruction through the mercenary defenses, but they were paying for every meter. Vorath's left wing hung at an awkward angle, damaged but still functional. Kethis bled from multiple wounds, and the Syndicate forces were regrouping, preparing for a final assault. "Where is that human?" Vorath snarled, taking cover behind a cargo container as energy blasts screamed past. "He'll come," Syrinx said with certainty she didn't entirely feel. The situation was deteriorating fast. The Syndicate capital ship had them pinned. Their own vessel was taking heavy fire. If Marcus didn't arrive in the next 3 minutes, an explosion rocked the far side of the hangar, not from enemy fire, from something else. Through the smoke came Marcus, running at full speed. Behind him streamed a river of children, young beings of a dozen species, holding hands, carrying the smallest ones, moving together with desperate determination. "Incoming!" Marcus shouted. "We need those ships now." Syrinx's eyes widened as she saw not 4 hatchlings but dozens of rescued prisoners. "You found more than expected." "Found a lot more than expected," Marcus gasped. Reaching the Caldrath position, he was covered in soot, bleeding from a dozen small cuts, but his eyes blazed with fierce determination. "We need 3 ships minimum. I can fly one." "Who else can pilot?" "I can," Kethis said immediately. "Me too," another pack member volunteered. Marcus quickly organized the children into 3 groups, prioritizing the youngest and most injured. The 4 silver-scale hatchlings chirped excitedly when they saw Syrinx, recognizing her as Caldrath like their parents. "Get them loaded," Marcus ordered, already moving toward the nearest transport ship. "I'll prep the engines." But as they began moving children toward the ships, a new voice echoed across the hangar. "Stop right there." A massive figure emerged from the smoke. Thaxos. The Krell warlord who commanded this operation. He stood 3 meters tall, covered in natural armor plating, holding a weapon that looked like it could punch through starship hulls. Behind him came 24 elite guards, weapons trained on the Caldrath position. "You've caused me considerable trouble," Thaxos rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. "That merchandise represents a significant investment. I can't allow you to simply take it." "They're not merchandise," Marcus said, stepping forward despite Syrinx's warning growl. "They're children. Living beings. And you're not keeping them." Thaxos laughed. A sound without humor. "A human. I should have known. Your species has this ridiculous tendency toward sentimentality. Saving beings who can't possibly repay you. Fighting battles that aren't yours. It's a weakness." "Funny," Marcus said, his hand moving subtly toward his weapon. "I was thinking it's our greatest strength. Then you'll die believing that," Thaxos said, raising his weapon. Time seemed to slow. Marcus knew he couldn't draw fast enough. Knew the children behind him were exposed. Knew this was probably the end. Then something small and fast launched from behind him. The eldest hatchling from Syrinx's brood, the one who'd first bonded with Marcus, attacked with surprising ferocity. It was tiny compared to Thaxos, barely the size of the warlord's arm, but it moved with desperate courage. Claws raked across Thaxos's face. Small jets of flame erupted from its mouth. "No," Marcus shouted, but the distraction gave him the opening he needed. His weapon came up. He fired 3 shots. Not at Thaxos, the armor would deflect them, but at the ceiling support beam directly above the warlord. The metal groaned, cracked, and collapsed. Thaxos staggered under the falling debris, his guards scattered, and in that moment of chaos, Syrinx and her pack attacked with everything they had. The hangar became a battlefield. Energy weapons lit the darkness. Caldrath fire breath turned cover into slag. Guards fell, but more kept coming. Marcus grabbed the hatchling, pulling it back to safety. "Brave, but stupid," he muttered, checking it for injuries. "Just like me." "Marcus," Kethis called. "We need to leave now." They retreated toward the ships, fighting every step. Marcus got his group of children aboard the first transport. Sealing the door, through the viewport, he saw Kethis loading the second ship, while Vorath covered them with devastating effect. But Syrinx was still fighting, holding the line, buying time for the others. "Matriarch, fall back!" Vorath roared. Syrinx turned to retreat. And that's when Marcus saw the danger. A guard with a heavy weapon, targeting the ship where the youngest children were loaded. One shot would kill them all. Marcus didn't hesitate. He threw himself from his ship, rolled across the hangar floor, and tackled the guard just as the weapon discharged. The shot went wild, missing the transport by meters, but Marcus and the guard crashed into a wall. Hard, pain exploded through Marcus's body. Something broke. Maybe several somethings. The guard raised a blade, preparing to finish him. Then Syrinx was there. Her massive form crashed into the guard like a meteor, ending the threat instantly. She scooped Marcus up with surprising gentleness, her claws cradling his broken body. "You fool," she said, but her voice was thick with emotion. "You beautiful, brave fool. Kids, safe?" Marcus managed through the pain. "Yes," Syrinx said. "Because of you." Again, she carried him to his transport, laying him carefully inside where the children watched with wide, frightened eyes. The eldest hatchling immediately pressed against Marcus, chirping frantically. "I'm okay," Marcus whispered, though he definitely wasn't. "Just need little rest." "Get them out of here," Syrinx commanded Keithus. Now, the 3 transports lifted off as the Cauldreth pack provided covering fire. They shot through the hangar bay doors, weaving between explosions and enemy fire. Behind them, the maw was coming apart under the combined assault. Marcus drifted in and out of consciousness during the flight. He was vaguely aware of small bodies pressed around him, keeping him warm, of voices speaking in languages he didn't understand but somehow knew were grateful, of someone holding his hand with tiny claws. When he finally woke properly, he was back aboard the Cauldreth ship. Healed again, though the medical team told him it had been closer this time. Much closer. Syrinx was waiting when he could walk again. "The children have been returned to their families," she reported. "All of them. 12 different species. Some hadn't seen their young in months. The gratitude." She paused, seeming overwhelmed. "The entire sector is talking about what happened, about the human who saved them." "I had help," Marcus said, looking at the 6 hatchlings who still refused to leave his side. "The Galactic Council wants to meet you," Syrinx continued. "The evidence we recovered from the maw, the records, the shipping manifests, the proof of syndicate operations, it's forcing them to act. They're launching a sector-wide crackdown on slaver networks." "That's good," Marcus said. But the syndicates have long memories," Syrinx said quietly. "You've become a symbol now. Someone who stood against them and won. They'll never stop hunting you." Marcus had expected this. "So what do we do?" Syrinx's expression softened. "We formally adopt you into the pack. Make you Cauldreth in all but blood. Under our protection. Forever." Marcus looked at the hatchlings. At Vorath standing in the doorway with something like respect in his scarred face. At Keithus offering a respectful nod. At Syrinx, this powerful matriarch who had become something like family. "I'm human," Marcus said. "I'll never be a dragon." "No," Syrinx agreed. "You'll never be Cauldreth. You'll be something better. You'll be the bridge between our species. The proof that different beings can work together, can care for each other, can become family. Can become family." The eldest hatchling chirped and pressed its head against Marcus's chest, right over his heart. "Besides," Vorath said gruffly, "someone needs to teach these hatchlings the strange human tricks you use. Might as well be you." Marcus laughed, then winced as Healing Ribs protested. "All right, I'm in. But I have one condition." "Name it," Syrinx said. "We don't stop with this one rescue," Marcus said firmly. "There are more kids out there. More families being torn apart. If I'm part of this pack, we make it our mission to find them. All of them." Syrinx's eyes gleamed. "I was hoping you'd say that. Several other packs have already asked to join our efforts. And..." She paused, showing him a message on her communicator. "Hundreds of humans have volunteered to help. Your species heard what happened. They want to be part of this." Marcus read the messages, his throat tight with emotion. Humans from across dozens of colonies, offering their skills, their ships, their lives, to help rescue children they'd never met. Compassion without calculating cost, Syrinx quoted softly. That's what makes your species dangerous, Marcus. And wonderful. You act on empathy even when it's illogical, even when it's dangerous, even when you have nothing to gain. It's just the right thing to do, Marcus said simply. Yes, Syrinx agreed. And that changes everything. 3 months later, the alliance between Caldreth Pax and Humyn volunteers had rescued over 200 children from various criminal organizations. The network was growing. More species joining, more families reunited, and at the center of it all was Marcus Chen, former salvager, now known across 17 systems as the Kethril, the human who'd protected dragon children and sparked a revolution of compassion. The eldest hatchling, now nearly twice its original size, sat on Marcus's shoulder as he planned the next rescue operation. The other 5 were nearby, practicing the flying techniques he'd taught them. Ready for the next one? Syrinx asked, reviewing target coordinates. Marcus looked at his strange, wonderful family dragons and humans working together, proving every day that the bonds of courage and compassion were stronger than any difference between species. Always, he said. Let's go save some kids. And as their ships jumped to hyperspace, carrying hope to the darkest corners of the galaxy, Marcus understood something profound. He'd spent years searching for purpose, for meaning, for something worth fighting for. He'd found it in the eyes of frightened children who needed someone to care. And that, he realized, was the most human thing possible. To see someone in need and simply say, I'll help, no matter the cost, no matter the danger, because some things were worth more than safety. Some things were worth everything. The end. Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.